huge numbers of people with severe mental illnesses because we don't have mental hospitals or whatever. We just stick them in jail. Where they're a danger to themselves and to their fellow inmates. And so the treatment of people with severe mental illnesses who are being untreated is a great crime in this country.
Today is really a huge step forward in bringing CITs to New York City. Up until this point, the NYPD had really been resistant to even hearing from the mental health community on how we could improve responses to mental health crisis calls. So after months of meeting and talking over the phone with the NYPD about community crisis intervention teams, today is the day that we are hand-delivering a proposal, as I said, that's really detailed, that talks about the three components of the crisis intervention team, how it can work in New York City, and why there's no need for the NYPD to delay any further. Take this proposal and make it happen. In the way that the country is set up now, prison really is used as a line of defense and a line of treatment for people with mental illness, and that's just an absurd concept that's gone on for too long. Prisons and jails are not treatment facilities. They are not a place for an individual to get any sort of treatment and any sort of recovery, so we need to take a step back and stop thinking about putting money into the prison system, but really start putting it back again into the community mental health system where everyone can be better served.
When people call 911 looking for help to deal with a loved one, they're not looking for individuals to come and victimize a person who is already suffering with a problem. We've seen it with Eleanor Bumpers, we've seen it with Gideon Bush in Borough Park, we saw it with the Morales case on Tompkins Avenue and others throughout the communities of color.
The NYPD resolving to implement community crisis intervention teams, CCITs, in 2011. CCITs are currently being used in over 100 major cities to de-escalate mental health crisis situations and ultimately save lives. With the help of rights for imprisoned people with psychiatric disabilities, RIPPD, CCITs will become a reality in NYC in 2011.
Community crisis intervention teams really isn't a new idea. It did start in the late 80s, early 90s in Memphis, Tennessee, when an individual was going through a mental health crisis. The cops were called to the scene, and ultimately the resolve was that the individual died at the hands of the cops. It was then that the mental health community said there really needs to be change, because if police are going to be the first responders to mental health crisis calls, then they either need to have better training so they can understand mental illness and help a person get into treatment, or they need help from the mental health community, from mental health workers and from peer specialists. So what we're doing in New York City is taking the idea of crisis intervention teams and really adapting it to fit the size and scope of New York City, and saying to the police department, there are thousands of people on the streets of New York City who are in need of access to mental health treatment, and when they call 911, they deserve full access to that treatment. So don't send a cop who has no training in mental illness to the scene, but send a cop who has a better understanding of mental illness, signs and symptoms, de-escalation, and beyond that, also send peer specialists, also send mental health social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, who can really better talk to the individual in crisis and get them into a place of treatment and recovery. And this should be happening 24/7 in every single precinct, because people with mental illness are everywhere and they deserve fair and humane treatment.
One of the key components to crisis intervention teams is the use of peer specialists on the team. We believe this will bridge a gap between law enforcement and the mental health community and people with mental illnesses. It'll give them a better understanding. The reason why peer specialists are so important to this team is because we have the life experience to de-escalate these situations. We also we also know that this cannot be implemented into the community unless the police and the community come together to support CCIT.
This proposal being handed delivered today is the beginning of a historic partnership between NYPD and the mental health community. The success of CCITs is guaranteed by having community and the police at the same table making decisions together and being involved in every level of the CCIT implementation. According to former training commissioners of the NYPD Police Department, James Fife, that NYPD responds to all involving in persons with mental illness every 6.5 minutes. Now it's time for community crisis intervention teams. You gotta excuse me. I suffer from a mental illness also. So as I was reading this, I studied. But we have to recognize those who suffer from mental illness, you don't have to be a mental illness. Fight. Fight hard. Fight for change. CCITs. Bring them in. We need them.